Welcome back to another review. Today's video isn't going to be a review of an album or a band per se. It's going to be an education on jazz. Now, I was out last night with family at a jazz club, and we caught a couple great sets of jazz. And just the word jazz is enough to turn a lot of people off. I think that it's a type of music that really isn't approachable for a lot of people. I think that, for myself, coming into jazz was later in life because I had gone through, rock and blues, classical, quite extensively classical. And jazz is really the last on my list, because it doesn't seem as structured as other types of music. It just sounds like a whole bunch of people doing whatever they want. And, I suppose in a way that's true, but there is structure under that. And if you do give some types of jazz a try, I think you might surprise yourself. It's actually a really great genre of music. So today I'm just going to talk about briefly the roots of jazz, and I'm also going to talk about some key artists and some albums that I think are very approachable. I think if you want to listen to jazz, you want to try it out, the albums that I'll mention, some of them are great for background music, some of them are great to just sit and listen to. And I'm going to recommend some that, once you dip a toe and you start enjoying some of it, I'm going to recommend some albums that to kind of push you a little further into the genre. So jazz started southern states, Louisiana, Dixieland jazz, guys like Louis Armstrong, the great Satchmo. That was one side of jazz. And you're probably familiar with that New Orleans style of jazz. It's not my favorite Dixieland because it is an older style, and I'll get into the style that I enjoy later, but it was certainly an important part of jazz history. Moving forward from the Dixieland type of stuff, you had the flip side of that a little later on, where you had people like, and I've got an album here, guys like Benny Goodman. This is live at Carnegie Hall, I think 1938. This is an old one. I actually got this from my old man. And of course, great clarinet player, more of a big band type of sound, but certainly was influenced by that earlier jazz stuff. As jazz progressed into the 40s and 50s, you had some really great names in jazz pop up. In particular, Charlie Parker, saxophone player, nicknamed the Bird. You may have heard of Charlie Parker. Excellent saxophone player, and paved the way for artists like Miles Davis and John Coltrane later. And you started to get into a style called bebop or free bop jazz, and that's where the music became less structured in a form and became a little more freestyle. And that's what I really dig, because all the people in the quartet or the trio or however many they are get a chance to solo, and it's a lot of fun. In the 1950s, you had Miles Davis come along. Now, Davis is probably the biggest, most famous name in jazz, and for good reason. Miles Davis was not only just a fantastic trumpeter, he went to Juilliard School of Music. His father was a dentist, and so he had the financial means to do that. So he got a great education at Juilliard, and when he left, he tracked down Charlie Parker and started to play with him. And that's where he really started to learn jazz, because Parker was an innovative and still one of the greatest saxophone players of all time. And he learned a lot. When Miles went solo, he came out with some pretty fantastic stuff. And one of his great first quartets included John Coltrane, and this one here is with Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb, Coltrane, Bill Evans, and Wynton Kelly. Now, if you haven't heard of this album, you should. It's one of the most famous, and some say the greatest jazz album ever made. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. I'll put that up there so you can see the cover. Now, A Kind of Blue is certainly a great place to start for jazz. It's a very approachable, very listenable album. There's nothing too shocking in it in terms of, it's not really off the charts into the bebop territory. It's something that you can put on and you can enjoy if you want to start with jazz. You can certainly start here, and you'd be starting with one of the greatest albums ever made in jazz. What makes it great? It's first off the players. I mean, Miles Davis, great trumpeter. John Coltrane, my favorite jazz artist, John Coltrane, fantastic sax player. Also, Cannonball Adderley is on this, another great sax player. And it's just a really great album, how they play. Very smooth jazz. It's a great trip. Now, some people there was an offshoot from Miles, and John Coltrane was one of those. And John Coltrane went on to do a solo career that was absolutely marvelous. Fantastic. And I've talked about this album that I'm going to show you. His album Love Supreme. This is not an album where you want to start because it is a little more avant-garde. It is a little bit more experimental, but it is for me, my opinion, this is the greatest jazz album ever made. It's extremely emotional. It's beautifully played. If you get into jazz and you want to kind of push yourself a little more into something that's going to be a little more emotional, more spiritual, this is it, definitely. So I'm going to talk about a couple other artists. In the 1950s and 60s, artist named Dave Brubeck, very popular artist, very popular jazz artist, came out with an album called Time Out. Dave Brubeck's Time Out is a massive seller, one of the biggest selling jazz albums of all time. Now, of course, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, racism, unfortunately, was still rampant, especially in music. There was a producer named Alfred Lyon who realized how much great black talent there was in jazz and teamed up with a producer named Rudy Van Gelder. And those two guys just started to bang off recordings of all these great artists, Coltrane and Davis and all these great jazz names. They recorded them, and thank God, because there's some fantastic albums that would have been missed because of the unfortunate racism that was happening. And Alfred Lyon was smart enough to say, hey, this is great talent, let's commit it to record, and a lot of great albums. Dave Brubeck, very approachable. This album, you'll like this album. Time Out is a really great album to start with as well. Definitely recommended. Another artist I'm going to talk about quickly here is Bill Evans. Bill Evans was a pianist, and he was he had a kind of a classical style of playing the piano interspersed with jazz. Didn't go down well with some critics, but in hindsight, he was one of the greats. This album here, Bill Evans Trio, live at the Village Vanguard. Sunday at the Village Vanguard. This album, you'll love this. Put it on in the background. Listen to it, one Sunday afternoon. I think you'll really dig it. There's a bass player on here named Scott LaFaro who died in his 20s shortly after this album was made. And widely regarded as one of the great bass players, even though he had a short career. Fantastic bass playing on this. But this is all around a fantastic album. Sunday at the Village Vanguard. I think you'll enjoy it. Now, jazz, like so many other genres, has so many great artists. A couple other albums I have here. Another great sax player named Hank Mobley. Now, Hank Mobley may not have as big a name as guys like Cannonball Adderley and John Coltrane, but great sax player, did some fantastic work. Hank Mobley, great name in sax. This was the one album that John Coltrane recorded for Blue Note. Blue Note Records is probably the most popular album. There was Blue Note, there was Prestige, there was a lot of different, well, not a lot of different labels, but certainly Blue Note and Prestige were a couple of the main ones. Coltrane only did one album. This one for Blue Note, it's called Blue Train. It's fantastic. Plays on there's a trumpet player on here named Lee Morgan. Now, Lee Morgan and I'm just going to show you. I have a great album called Cornbread by Lee Morgan. One of my favorite trumpet players. I love Lee Morgan's playing. Now, Lee Morgan, interesting story, shot to great success in his career, and then fell to drug addiction. Was basically in the sewer. Like he was washed up. That was it. And there was a woman that came and helped him out of the gutter and turned his life around and said, look, you're better than what you are right now. And he started to play again. And she wound up shooting him at a gig that he was playing at. And he probably would have survived, but it was a snowy day in New York and it took forever. It's forever for the ambulances to get there. And it's a real tragedy because Lee Morgan did a great album called Live at the Lighthouse. I think it was San Francisco. It was definitely West Coast, I believe. And who knows, he could have had a great second coming. But Lee Morgan, another great name to check out. So, like I said, I could talk forever about a lot of different genres of music, and jazz is one that a lot of people shy away from. If it's not your cup of tea, that's fine, man. Like, it's your opinion. It wasn't for mine for a long time, but I've probably got about 70 or 80 jazz records. Slowly collecting more. Jazz album collecting is actually very lucrative. I have a couple of records here actually that are, a couple first pressings. Now, what does first pressing mean? It means it was one of the first series of records pressed on the master disc. And theoretically, that is supposed to give it a better sound. I don't know how true that is, to be honest, but it's certainly collectible, and I do have a couple of those. It's a fun hobby, jazz record collecting, and it's great to listen to, a lot of fun to listen to. So anyway, Miles Davis, Kinda Blue, Bill Evans, Sunday, The Village Vanguard, Dave Brubeck, Time Out, yeah, start with those ones. See what you think, and post a comment. Let me know what you think too. Love to hear it. So I hope you're enjoying your Sunday, and another band coming up in another day or two, and still having fun. Hope you're enjoying watching. Peace.